So hey Hugo,
Hey.
we're here, 4MS, it's Nam, and you're going to show off the spherical wavetable, which we saw at Super Booth,
Yep.
but it's in a bit more of a finished form right now.
Absolutely, yes. Lots of new features and new hardware for it too. All right, so the module has three main parts to it. The top section here, which is currently a mixer, and then the LFO section here, and then the wavetable browsing here. So what this module is, it's 6 independent oscillators, and they're wavetable oscillators. And the wavetables are special because they're organized within a sphere, so in a ball within a sphere, and you browse them with spherical coordinates, which I'll go back to later, but they're browsed in this section. So this mixer section here allows muting and unmuting individual oscillators. I'm going to turn the sound on. So right now they all have the same pitch, and I can mute and unmute them here. As you can hear, some go left and some go right. It's like on the SMR, you can have one output and all of them are normalized to the output, or two outputs stereo, and then odds go to one side and evens go to the other. So right now they all have the same pitch. Couple concepts on this module. All controls are global. First, when you turn them, so I'm turning transpose. All the oscillators are moving together. These are global controls. And anything that you control globally, you can control individually by choosing a channel and turning the knob. In this case, I'm creating chords. And those are offsets that I can then transpose all together with the main control. I'm going to clear them and go back up. Another concept that I'd like to introduce before going into details with the module is that we have new encoders on there, which are RGB encoders. You can see them changing color when I press them. And the way they work is that you can either turn them or press and turn them. So turn is primary controls, which are the ones displayed in black labels. And press and turn are secondary controls, which are the ones displayed in gold labels underneath. And you will see that all the encoders have that way of displaying primary and secondary controls, and that some of the jacks have a gold ring, which corresponds to the secondary control of the encoder. So once you get that concept, it's very easy to use. So those were the main concepts here. So I'm going to go back to what we can do with it. So right now, all our oscillators are playing the same notes, and they're independent. So I can detune them, but I can also independently detune them. And you can see how they're detuned in relation to each other on the main ring. Switching octaves here. Okay, now I can create chords with the transpose knob. So that's a chord that I can transpose globally. Then there are 6 LFOs here that are currently, you see the outputs with individual outputs that you can see with the LEDs. And the LED indicates the amplitude of the output with the brightness, and then the waveform of the LFO with both the brightness and the color. I'll go through the waveforms. But those LFOs are wavetable LFOs, and they also run at audio rates. So if you wanted, you could use those 6 outputs as oscillators with individual outputs.
So essentially 12 wavetable oscillators.
Exactly, 12 independent wavetable oscillators.
And each wavetable is independent, so it could be a different wavetable per 12.
Absolutely, yes. Each oscillator can have its own wavetable, own pitch, own speed if you're using LFOs, and own phase for the LFOs. I'll get to this in a second. So the mixer section here, you can control the volume of each of your oscillators. You can also send the LFOs to the VCAs that are controlled with the sliders with this button here, which you can see an arrow going from the LFOs to the VCAs. So now our LFOs are controlling the VCA of each note, And then there's this other button here that has 3 shapes next to it. One that is kind of a wavetable LFO shape, another one that's a gate, and another one that's a trigger. So the LFO shape is what we're hearing now, which is a sine LFO. The other shape underneath is a gate. So whenever your LFO goes mid-range, it opens the gate, and then when it goes below mid-range, it closes the gate. And then below that is trigger. At every rising edge, you get a trigger. So I'm gonna go through them. Gate. Trigger. So all of a sudden you get this sort of a sequencer mode, which you can still transpose. And then change your notes on the fly. Use the mixer to turn parts off. And then do things like that. So going back to the LFOs, we can control the LFO speed with this knob. They go all the way to audio rate, so I can AM the VCAs. They can go really slow. They're going by increments of multiple integer multiplications and divisions. So they're all tied to the same clock, so I can create a rhythm by adjusting them individually. There's another control on the pitch of the VCOs that I'm going to show now, which is octave. You can see the octave changing on the ring in the same way you sort of fine-tune and transpose. And same thing, I can adjust it individually. So I can create things like this, speed it up. You can also put them all in phase. So before the LFOs were running at a 60-degree out of phase of each other, and now they're all running in phase, and I can adjust the phase, delaying a little bit to create a shuffle.
So basically the kind of basic workflow with it is if you want to adjust an individual wavetable, you just hold the button at the top and then any of the controls can basically relate to just that one as opposed to all of them. Okay.
Exactly. Whichever control goes globally, you choose the channel you want to control and then you can apply it individually. We can choose different shapes. So we're going to hear that I'm going to switch back to shapes, to regular shapes, and clear the LFOs actually. That. Okay. So now I'm back to regular LFO, make a quick chord. Transpose this. Octaves. So we're looking at different LFOs here that I'm going to send to the VCA. We're just going to send to a channel. So you can hear it being a sine wave, but we have other LFO shapes. You have short attack, long decay, slow attack, short decay. And these are different wavetables that are more complex. And so if I convert this to a trigger, I get a pulse train that is not tied to a main clock, it's loose, it's free rhythm within a main clock. So you can get some interesting push-pulls.
We can adjust each one individually, so we can get even weirder stuff.
Exactly.
Mental.
Exactly.
So what about the kind of navigation section down here? So
that's exactly where I was going. Awesome. So the wavetable is the list of waveforms available for the oscillators, and they're organized within spheres. So inside the sphere, you can browse and you have a meshing. So imagine a ball, and you go within that ball and you browse the meshing, and the meshing defines the waveform for each of your oscillators. And the way you see them on this ring is the outer LED ring. It's organized per channel. So I'm going to start with the coordinate system. To browse this sphere, you're using the spherical coordinates. So you have 3 coordinates. You have the depth, then you have the latitude and the longitude. So latitude and longitude are angles, which is different from usual coordinate system like Cartesian. So you have depth, latitude, longitude, and you can browse them globally like this. So you have individual controls here with the little drawings that show you the depth, latitude, and longitude. And as I browse, you can see the outer LED ring turning red. I'm going to dephase a little bit. Okay, so we can see it turning red or changing colors. So you can clearly hear the timbre change here. And so the colors indicate where we are in the sphere. Depth is indicated with red tones, latitude green tones, and longitude blue tones. And you can individually adjust your channels. So let's listen to 2 of them. This one. Let's choose the same pitch. Whoop. Let me clear that actually, be faster. Okay. Okay, now they have the same pitch. And I'm going to change the timbre of just one of them. So now this one has this timbre, and this one has this one. So they each have their own timbre, and you can tell that the channel is organized by 3. So the first 3 are A, B, C, D, E, F. And you can tell that channel C, this guy, is offset in its location within the sphere. So it has a different spot in there, and so a different timbre. They can each have their own, so B can be offset in a different way. Sorry, D. So we'll see a different color. So that's how you browse them. And then those offsets can be kept as you browse. You can, other ways to browse, there's extended controls for that. Of course, there's CV. So you can grab your LFO. I'm going to slow down these LFOs. Now we just have 2 oscillators. I'm going to put the other ones. There's another way to browse, which is using the extended controls, which are dispersion and dispersion pattern. So dispersion is how dispersed the voices are within the sphere. So the position of each voice within the sphere is the timbre of that voice. And if you spread them, they each get a different timbre based on where they are in relation to each other. And so this control here, that also has a CV jack, is how much you spread them within the 3D space. And then there's another control, which is spread pattern, and it's in which way they're going to spread. So if you had an LFO going into this, you get into the spread, you get something that looks like this. My fingers being your voice spreading in the sphere. And then if you change the pattern with another CV, then you get this. Or like, you know, I cannot cross my fingers in the way they should, but that's the idea. So we can listen to that as well. All right. So I'm going to spread them. You can see the color changing here. I'm going to put them all at the same pitch. And then switching the pattern. You can hear the pattern switching too. Also, something that I haven't mentioned yet is that each oscillator has its own drift that's based off of an analog noise within the module. The module is digital, but it's based off of analog noise, and each of them drifts differently. So if you were to look even all of them at the same pitch, exact same pitch, exact same wavetable, you look on an oscillator, on an oscilloscope, and you'll see your waveform changing because of how they phase with each other. So that's super interesting. So we looked at how we can browse a sphere, how we can move the voices within the sphere. Now we can also select other spheres. So I'm going to send my LFOs to the VCAs and go a little bit faster. And now I'm going to change the sphere. So the spheres as we go get more and more harmonic content. And which sphere is loaded on each voice is indicated by the inner ring. So you can see the color changing, which can be changed individually as well. Now this voice here is different. You can tell it's much brighter. And then I can put a little bit of delay on that with the typographic here. Through a kick from the sampler. So now we're synced to this main clock that I grabbed from the Swan. So once your Swan is in trigger mode, you can grab those triggers to send as your main clock for your system and sync everything. So now we're going to look at quantized scales because each of the 1 volt per octave inputs and global transpose have quantizations. So now we're listening to the oscillators, and I'll mute them all but one so we can hear it's 1 volt per octave quantization. So you have 1 volt per octave inputs here and a switch to switch those volt per octave inputs to VCA, which is really like level on the SMR. So right now we're listening to the 1 volt, the first oscillator, and I'm gonna grab an LFO and put it into its 1 volt per octave. So now it's unquantized. Just have pitch drift and quantized. And I press enter in this encoder that says scale for secondary. The color changed, it's major.
So at the moment, has that happened globally? So if we turn the... So
yes.
Yeah. They've all changed color?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can still transpose. They all get transposed together. There's also a jack for the global transpose here. So now they're all transposing together. And I can still make offsets for a chord. So now they're all going individually. I can also still play the mixer like before. Of course, change the waveforms. But then what's especially interesting with this is the switch here. So there's multiple modes. I'm going to start with the bottom one. We were on mutes before. There's mutes, note, and keys. I'm going to go on keys now. So what keys does is that now the LFOs are not cycling anymore. and they only start when I press the key. And they don't cycle, they just play once. So they turn into really an envelope generator, of which I can adjust the attack and decay with the speed. So now I can play those notes.
So is there a way of playing those notes with like a gate signal?
Yeah, well now I'm really playing it by hand. But I can still, underneath what I'm playing, because I've set those notes on each oscillator. I'm muting them with a VCA. So they're becoming keys on the keyboard to which I have assigned a pitch for each of them. But I can also transpose globally underneath my hands. So now every time I play, I'll get a different note based on the global quantization. There's also minor scales.
So how many scales do we have in the?
Currently, this is a prototype, so there are just no quantization, major and minor harmonic, but there will be much more eventually. Probably not as much as the SMR, because it's the SMR job to hold the scales. They're great companions to each other. So, but there's definitely going to be more, and there's going to be non-Western scales for sure as well. And finally, the last mode is with this switch is note mode. And note mode is interesting because your VCA get triggered every time the quantization changes for a voice. So now I put all my oscillators on the same pitch, and every time the transposition will change, it will trigger the VCA. So they're all going together. I'm setting up octaves, and I'm going to transpose them. You can still transpose that. And what's interesting is now we have a melody with chords, and if I change the shape of my LFO, I can change the way my thing sounds. I completely changed the notes and the groove by changing the shape of my LFO on the peg. Adding a little bit of a delay on it.
So amazing.
Thanks.
When is it going to be ready, and what is the price point going to be?
At some point in 2018, probably towards the end of the year, and price point was going to be upper 500s.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Hugo.
Thank you. Thank
Cheers.
you. Have a good one.